Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 3 Point Weekly. Today, we're going to be ranking what has arguably been the hardest position for us to rank in this top 10 position series, and that is going to be shooting guards, where there's a ton of talent, but it's hard to decipher between them. We're going to start off again with Gabe this week. It's going to be interesting to see where these lists go. I think we're going to have a lot more debates this week compared to the point guards, but I'll start off with you, Gabe, to give us your number 10.
You know, what's funny is I really thought, like I was saying last week, that this might be the one with the most sort of discourse around who number one might be. But I had a conversation with Tyrik, I think, on like Wednesday or so. And if we all had the same number one, I would not be too surprised. But what I will say is my number 10 here was kind of a shock. I didn't expect him to make my top 10 so quickly. But here I have Desmond Bane for the reason that the role he plays, it's like right now he's kind of like on that sort of edge between high value role player and sort of you can see that he kind of has that star potential to take that next leap. But as far as what he does right now, it's like he's kind of taken 3-and-D and almost become the best at that in the league right now. And not to mention just that, but Ja Morant missed a lot of games for the Grizzlies last season. And while he was doing that, Desmond Bane really stepped up and, in my opinion, was the best player on that team while he was out. And that team while he was out, while yes, they had a lot of depth, they won almost every game. And that's with him as their premier option. So, I mean, that gives him bonus points in my book. Plus, he pretty much kept his consistency up in the playoffs, which, as we saw last episode, I value quite a bit. So, Desmond Bane, I'll see what you guys say.
He almost made my list, and then I realized I forgot somebody, so I had to bump him down. So he was like the next guy off. My 10 was Freddie, which obviously he should be a point guard, which is once again ESPN getting their rankings wrong. But since he's in the shooting guard pool, I got Fred VanVleet. Second half of the season was kind of rough, but his first half was special. He was obviously an all-star, and a lot of nights he was the best player for the Raptors, especially when Pascal missed that time early on in the season. And he's just proven like time and time again that he's continuing to get better. I mean, somebody that was an undrafted player has turned into an all-star and, making a lot of money. And I think still his best basketball might be yet to come, and I'm excited to see him in this upcoming season as well.
Yeah, I echo very similar thoughts. Bane was the guy who just missed out on my list. Everything you said, Gabe, was exactly how I feel about Desmond Bane. Very good player, still got a lot of upside, but narrowly missed out on the list for this year. For me, I also had Fred VanVleet at number 10. Like you said, great first half of the season. Played very well to get himself on the All-Star team. Struggled with a few nagging injuries over the back half of the season, which did hurt his production a little bit. If he can get to a point where he can have a little bit more efficiency, then I think that's when you really start to see that next big leap from Freddie. And I mean, like you've said, he just continues to improve year in, year out. So there's no reason to believe why he couldn't get there over the next year or two.
Yeah, real quick. I was
ahead.
just going to say, to touch on Desmond Bane, like it's kind of crazy to even think that he's in top 10 conversations already because he was the last pick of the first round in his draft class. So the fact that he's even in top 10 conversations and has a real case, it's kind of crazy to see, man. It's just a testament to like his work ethic and also just how the Grizzlies always seem to develop guys to be better than what they're expected to be.
Yeah, so I'm going to have to say I'm going to have to take the L right here. Because of ESPN's positional things, I totally did forget Freddie. Because Fred VanVleet is a point guard on the Raptors.
Yeah, 100%.
He played most of his minutes there. And so I wasn't even thinking about like his position because obviously I watch more Raptors than anybody else. I think if you ask me right now, I probably would put Freddie at 10 over Desmond Bane. But if you ask me a year from now, Desmond will probably be above him. So I'm happy I was able to give him that love. But I would take that out.
Hey, stand on it. If you think Desmond is number 10, stand on it.
Because I forgot Fred, but I think that Desmond was a clear number 11 over anybody else.
Okay.
I just did forget a player.
Yeah, I don't like. Do y'all think it's like close? Like, Dave, did you think like at all like putting Desmond Bane above Freddie?
I thought about it for a little bit, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's that close yet. because
Okay.
I don't think there's enough of a gap in there. Like Freddie and Bane are both good scorers. I don't think Bane is like. I think you can argue that Bane isn't even a better scorer than Freddie. In fact, I probably would make that argument. And then Freddie has an argument for defense over Bane, although they're both good defenders. And Freddie definitely has an argument as a much better playmaker, much better guy at running the offense. So I think Freddie just has a little bit more going for him still at this point in time in his career. But give it a year or two, like you guys said, and Bane could definitely climb up this list.
Yeah, like I said, Desmond is like the premier 3-and-D guard at this point, especially among young players. So it's like at what he does, he is amazing at it. But I think Freddie is just so dynamic, obviously. Had an all-star appearance last season. And while Pascal Siakam missed the beginning of the season and then didn't really heat up until later, it was really Freddie doing a lot of the heavy lifting on that team, who ended up being a 5 seed. So, he kind of carried the load for long enough to keep them in where they wanted to be.
Also, ESPN is kind of crazy because I also saw like Gary Trent was near the like middle of the pack and like top scorers at the 2 guard position, which how could you have 2 guys playing the same exact position? It just does not make sense.
Yeah, facts.
That's like when the Warriors used to have like KD and Draymond listed at power forward. Like they're in the same lineup. How are they both power forward?
Exactly.
Man. Okay, so are we on to number 9?
We are on to number 9.
Yes.
Okay. Call me crazy. Bradley Beal.
I don't call you crazy.
I have Bradley Beal at number 9. I think I'm very low on him compared to most people because of this whole bleak Washington situation and him just kind of staying there and putting up numbers and not really leading to a ton of things ever since kind of the Wall and Beal dynamic fell off. They haven't really done much. They had this season with Westbrook, which Westbrook as a floor raiser is well known. So them getting to the 8th seed, you could attribute, at least in fair part, to Westbrook with Beal. But on his own as a number 1, and clearly that's the player he wants to be, is a number 1. What is he really doing for you? How far is he getting you? And I think that lowers his value a lot for me, simply because of the fact it's like he doesn't want to go be a number 2, or whether it's just because he's staying in Washington or because of the role or because he gets to put up the numbers or whatever it may be. It's just like it feels like he has pretty decent stats and maybe some better stats than some guys that are above him, but it just feels like his impact is so low in the grand scheme of things that it just makes me lower on him than maybe I should be, if that makes sense.
I don't think that's crazy at all. I don't have him at 9, but he'll be talked about very soon. I'll just say that much, man. My number 9 is DeJounte Murray, who was a point guard last year, but will be playing the 2 this year. So I guess it's kind of fitting. All-star kind of season for him, for a team in the Spurs that probably shouldn't have made the play-in, but they were able to make the play-in. He had a very, very good year, very good all-around year, showing that he could be an impactful player on a team that, probably shouldn't have been as good as they were. I'm just so interested to see this Trae Young and DeJounte dynamic, though. Like, that's really all I can think of. We know what DeJounte brings to the table. We know what Trae Young brings to the table. But how will they coexist? That's going to be the interesting thing. But I think DeJounte did everything he needed to be a top 10, I guess, shooting guard last season. But we'll see if he's top 10 on the list next year, man, for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree. I also had DeJounte Murray at number 9. Like you say, we know his impact. Such a smooth mid-range shooter. He's so fun to watch from a mid-range shooter, and I love pure mid-range shooters. It's apart from being a Toronto Raptors fan and why I like DeMar DeRozan so much. But you get that. You get his defense, like you said. Him playing alongside Trae Young is going to be very fun to see. I couldn't quite give him the edge over Bradley Beal, but as you mentioned, Tyrik, he's not far off being talked about on my list either.
I hope we don't have the same exact list.
There's no way for shooting guards we end up having the same list. No shot.
You guys might end up. I guess I'm really the odd man out in this episode so far.
Yeah.
Apparently, that does seem to be your theme.
It really does, which I don't know if that means I'm giving good takes or really bad takes. I guess, well, I don't know. Maybe your guys' philosophies are just more similar to each other's than to me.
I think a lot of these guys are interchangeable in a way. Like,
definitely.
You're splitting hairs, like putting DeJounte or Bradley Beal ahead of each other. Like it's very, very finite details that you
Yeah.
got to look at.
Definitely. I mean, Bradley Beal was number 9 on my list yesterday, and he's not today. So that tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, I think this is this is one of those rankings where it almost feels more like a tier list than like actual like 1 to 10. It's more like
That's a good point.
my like top 3 are kind of like, okay, these are the top guys. Then like probably like my 4 through 6 is like after that, and then like 7 to 10 is kind of like then like tier 3 guys. And I feel like that's kind of like that interchangeability you're talking about of like I said, I think I said before we started recording, I made this list back on like Wednesday. So maybe we're talking about it. And then I think, ooh, maybe I want to make a last second switch. I don't know. And it's because it's so close.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely is.
So my eight's Bradley Beal, like I already kind of mentioned. I think Gabe said everything that needs to be said. I'm not that high. I kind of been on I'm not as high on Bradley Beal for a couple of years now because his 30 points per game that he was averaging just didn't really result to anything. And it's like, yeah, you're getting numbers, you're getting your money, which is cool. But at some point, you got to take pride in wanting to win some games. And it seems like he's content with just being a bag chaser. So, I'm not that impressed, man. And he had a down year last year for his standards, man. His percentages were down, only shot 30% from 3. Scoring was down. Playmaking was better, but he kind of had to be a better playmaker because they didn't have any guards. So just not an impressive year for him. We'll see if he can bounce back and maybe the Wizards can be a fake playing team like they tried to be last year. But it's not impressed with Bradley Beal lately, man.
I want to transition off of that because my number 8 is CJ McCollum. And it was incredibly close between him and Bradley Beal. And the thing that kind of sold me on McCollum over Beal was looking at last year's stats specifically, because my philosophy so far when making this list is what is the last version I saw of them. And like you said, Bradley Beal percentages were down, scoring numbers were way down. And CJ, last time we saw him, was playing probably the best ball he's ever played. Going to the Pelicans, kind of coming in as their point guard, which makes it kind of weird because it's a shooting guard list. But just what he did when he was able to go over there and kind of take over as a lead guard and a premier player next to Brandon Ingram and the rest of that young core, I feel like he fit in really well as a veteran presence for them to kind of lead that team in the backcourt and really kind of spread the offense out a little bit. Has obviously his own scoring game. Not the greatest defender in the world, but I think his offense is on a level. And especially, I mean, when it comes to him versus Beal at that same tier, I don't think Beal's much of a defender either. So for them, I was kind of looking purely at offensive game almost for who I was going to put over who. And very close, but just given kind of what I've seen from you most recently, I'm going with CJ.
Yeah, definitely. CJ definitely showed how valuable he can be last year with the Pelicans, more to a level than he's been able to with Portland because of now being that main guard in the backcourt. We haven't been able to see him take over an offense as much, been able to create his own offense as much, be able to create offense for others as much. So, as you mentioned, if you're basing things off of what we last saw from CJ was absolutely brilliant last year with the Pelicans. So, I definitely can definitely respect the argument for him over Bradley Beal there as well.
It's always been CJ over Bradley Beal for me.
Yeah, Beal probably would have been higher up on this list a couple of years ago, but he's definitely fallen down a bit in recent years. He's at number 8 for me as well. Like you said, Tyrik, he struggled last year as well, which definitely hurt him. I find Beal so hard to rank because he's played on such bad teams for so long now that he can put up numbers, but they just don't go anywhere. And add the fact that I'm not really a fan at all of the current direction of the Wizards, or I should say lack of direction. And I don't want to be too critical of Beal because if he wants to stay and get his bag, then I'll respect that. He stays and gets his bag. But then he just sits there and isn't really going to be a good number 1 option. He doesn't get to compete in the playoffs. So if he was considered a number 2 on some other teams, as some of these guys higher up the list are, I probably still put him here. So this is the spot I ended up for him, but Beal's just a weird one to rank.
Yeah, him as a number 2 would be beautiful. Like a lot of teams could use that guy as a number 2 option, but as a number one, he's like one of the lesser tier number one options that you can have in the league. Just and especially like you mentioned, his supporting cast is so pathetic. Like it's just not built for him to be the best player on a team that's not built in any way to support him. So yeah, tough player to rank, man. Yeah, we'll see. It sucks, man, because he's so super talented. Like we've seen him in the playoffs have big time moments too, but the Wizards are kind of the definition of purgatory right now.
It reminds me of ranking like Russ about 2-3 years ago, in that sense of like this is his skill set and his game is built to be a number one, but how far is he taking you as that versus like a player who might be a little bit worse when it comes to their talent level, but because they can have better fit alongside more players or the willingness to do so, it kind of raises them above because of that flexibility.
Yeah, I agree. I don't even necessarily think he's built to be a number one. I just think he's had to make himself a number one. It's like we've seen he can be very good as a number two. Off ball, he can be a good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. I think he'd fit in well as a number two. He has fit in well as a number two, but I mean, he's been 3-4 years now where he's had to be a number one. So I mean, we're so far removed from seeing him play like a secondary option.
It's kind of like, I mean, this is more like a lesser level comparison, but like NBA players can show that they can be number one options. Like Jeremy Grant went to Detroit and showed like I can put up 24 points per game. I can be a number one option. We're not going to be good, but I can do it. And Bradley Beal's kind of like in a similar situation, just kind of, I guess, better, because he can put up 30 points a game and make some of his teammates a little bit better. But, only certain guys can just take anybody to the playoffs. Like, James Harden, LeBron, Russ when he was in his prime. Like it's only a select few guys that can do that, and Bradley Beal's not one of them.
Which I think if it was like just a by chance thing, and it's like, say like a year or two after like John Wall got traded, like they weren't very good. Bradley Beal was dropping like 30 points a game, and he just kind of situationally, or like when I should say more so when John Wall was out with injury, because when he got traded, obviously Russ was on the team. But when John Wall was out with injury, it's like, okay, this is purely by chance. Now it's kind of by choice. And so it's almost like a mindset thing of because he's choosing to be the number one option, it kind of then I think the grading is a little bit harder. But I'll say moving on to number 7 now for me is where I have DeJounte Murray. So I guess I'm the highest on him out of the three of us. I think it's just his outside shot is obviously not there with the rest of, honestly, pretty much anybody else on the list. But everything else about him is so impressive. Like from obviously his defense to his playmaking game last season. I mean, the fact that he was averaging a near triple-double on the Spurs and a team that they weren't great, but they weren't a bottom feeder either. Obviously making the play-in, or I believe they made the play-in. Maybe they were in contention. I think they made
it. Yeah, they made it about the Lakers.
Right, Lakers slander. But he's so well-rounded, and I feel like especially when he's going to come into the Hawks and play that role, I think that it'll allow him to excel even more. So I expect him to go up the list because basically if you look at his skill set, he covers almost all of Trae Young's weaknesses. And so with him already being this high on my list, like maybe he won't get as much shine, but as far as effectiveness, it's like I think the Hawks really got the perfect player to say, okay, here's what we already have in our backcourt. How do we kind of fill in the blanks and fill in the gaps and kind of round out what we have here? And I think DeJounte really is that. Obviously, he has that mid-range game to kind of fill in as well for some scoring and give a different dynamic to their offense. And so just on both sides of the ball, it's like I think he's really going to make a big impact on that team. And clearly, as an all-star last season, he made a big impact on the Spurs, who I expect now to be bottom feeders with him gone. So I think he can raise a team's ceiling quite a bit and their floor, as seen last season.
He's going to get paid on his next contract because he's on one of the most like team-friendly deals in the league, considering he was an all-star. I think it's like 14 a year or something low like that. It's crazy.
More near what he should
Man.
be getting paid, that's for sure. Average salary is 16 mil.
That's insane, man. Yeah. That's a good point though, Gabe. Like I think like his numbers will probably drop just because he's playing with Trae Young and better players all around. But you said his effectiveness will be better, and I think that's how it's gonna be. Like he might drop to like 17, 18 a game, but we'll see his impact. Like I think he'll be more engaged defensively because when you're playing for like the Spurs and you're the best player, you don't really have a ton of help outside of like Keldon Johnson. Offensively, you're kind of probably not going to be as engaged defensively as we've seen him in the past being an all defensive player. So hopefully he can get back to that because that's really where he made his name for himself was as a defender and playing alongside Trae Young. You got to be locked in. So it's a good point. My 7 was CJ. I think this is a good spot for him, man. The guys that I have ahead of him, I couldn't put CJ that high. If he had a full season of what he did in New Orleans, which was almost like 25 points per game, I think he could be higher. But we only saw that for about 26 games. But in those 26 games, he was incredible. Played the point guard role, which for the first time in his career we got to see. And I was impressed of how well he was able to do it because he had only done it in spurts without Damian Lillard, like missing games here and there. And he was able to step up, man, get that team to the playoffs. He was a big part of that. Him and Brandon Ingram were key. And I'm so excited to see this Pelicans core healthy and on the court and see just how good they can be because I think CJ is the perfect guard for BI and Zion. Somebody that's unselfish but can get you a bucket whenever need be. So, yeah, CJ at 7 I think is perfect for him. And maybe he can make an all-star push this season, man. We'll see. We will see.
No, he's definitely got an outside shot at it, depending on the Pelicans' record, no doubt.
The West is like so stacked with guards as it has been forever, though. I mean, they did just lose an all-star guard, which we'll get to later, but
they lost too because DeJounte was an all-star as well.
That is true. He was. But there's so many guards in the West.
Dame coming back.
It's definitely an outside shot, but it literally I feel like if the Pelicans are like a 2 seed, he might get in. But I think they'd have to be like incredible.
Imagine they're like 40 and 15 at the break or something crazy like that. 2K loves it.
That'd be crazy. Yeah, absolutely crazy.
Please tell me you got somebody other than CJ at 7.
I do not have CJ at 7.
Oh, you got him higher?
I'm surprised. I thought you would be the guy who has CJ highest on the list, but actually I say that. Given where I have him, that's probably not an accurate statement. But I have Zack Lavine at 7. Very good year last year, but man, this was really tough for me from 7 to 4. This was very interchangeable from there, but Lavine was very good last year despite his injuries. That obviously did held him back a bit statistically, but he's still a very nice number 2. This is where you're talking about when you're comparing to Beal, like how do you think of these guys as a good number 2 when Zack Lavine is a very good number 2 as DeMar kind of took that number 1 role last year. It's just tough, man. This is low for him, but it's tough. There's a lot of talent ahead of him.
Man.
I had to put Lavine at 7.
Man, I was not expecting that. I'm going to be honest. I was not expecting Lavine at 7. Ooh, that's tough. I agree. Like, yeah, once you get to the top 7, it's really like, it's tough. It is tough, man. Lavine at 7, though, I was not expecting. I thought you would have him a little higher for sure.
I don't know. It's tough. Lavine was the odd man out.
I'm interested now.
At 6, I have Lavine at 6, so I don't think that's too crazy. When I said my 6 and my 7 feel the most interchangeable, like my DeJounte and Zach is close for me, which is weird because you guys had DeJounte way lower. But it's almost like when I had Drew Holiday the highest last episode, it's like his skill set is so different that it almost makes him like more interesting to rank for me. And it's like he brings something unique that nobody else really does. But at the end of the day, I decided to keep Zach above him at 6 just because of his kind of scoring ability and takeover ability and the fact that you've seen him be, at least I think, more of a 1B on a playoff team. So a little bit more proven. Really, I think the thing is, and I guess I am kind of going against my own logic here by saying, what did I see from you most recently? I'd say end of the season, Zach Lavine was definitely not the best, but I think that is more due to injury, and that's what I'm kind of blaming kind of the slump on, where DeMar really took over as one. I really just think early in the season, it was kind of both of them. Zach gets injured, and then he comes back, and he's not really the same. So it's like, I think right now, since he's had the offseason, healthy on September 4th, Zach Lavine is the sixth best shooting guard in the league. And if you put him on the court right now, he would be better than everybody above him, has shown plenty of dynamic aspects to his game, and I expect him to come back out and prove that, wow, yes, he might have fallen into number 2 last season. He is still very much at a 1B level when healthy.
This is where I was kind of flip-flopping between two guys. I got Zach Lavine at 6 too. Yeah, he was still really good, even though he was playing hurt. But got to play winning basketball for the first time in his career, and he was still pretty effective, even though he was dealing with injury pretty much all season. I want to see him get back to. I mean, he was an all-star last year, but I want to see like Zach Lavine, because we didn't really see Zach Lavine. He wasn't really attacking the paint like he usually does, selling for a lot of jumpers and stuff. I just want to see him, just back to himself, and I think he can get back there. Almost had him number 5, but I can't disrespect this guy a little too much, so I'm gonna move Lavine down to 6, and I think that's a good spot for him.
Yeah,
not confident, but yeah,
I think that's a good spot for him for sure. I was a little bit lower on him, but I think that's definitely a fair spot for him. Hopefully we see him stay healthy this year, and we can see a year or two Zach Lavine as opposed to him struggling with injuries for the majority of last season. As far as my number 6, if we thought Lavine at 7 was rough, this one might be worse. I have Donovan Mitchell at 6.
Oh shit!
Wow!
I have Donovan Mitchell at 6. As mentioned earlier, between 7 to 4 for me was very, very tight. As far as what made me put Donovan Mitchell at 6, obviously he is a great offensive player. There's no doubt about it. And as we'll talk about later, Cleveland have got an amazing offensive shooting guard. When I was comparing him to the guys that I was debating, ranking him above or below, I didn't feel differently enough about any of the 3 or 4 guys offensively from a scoring perspective. So then I had to start thinking about the rest of the game. How do I feel about their playmaking? How do I feel about their defense? None of them are great defensively, but from a playmaking standpoint, Mitchell has improved and he's getting better. But I like the guys that I put above him just a little bit more from a playmaking standpoint than I do Donovan Mitchell. That's not to say Mitchell's a bad playmaker by any stretch. I think he's quite a good one, but he had to fall at number 6 to me. That lack of playmaking was just a little bit too much for me, and so I had to give a couple other guys a nod.
Okay, all right. I've got 2 questions. So the first thing is CJ over Donovan?
CJ is over Donovan on my list, yes.
Hey, I love it. Y'all know me. I love CJ, so I ain't mad at it.
I listen, okay, I love CJ, but Donovan Mitchell has been a number 1 option on a team that has won playoff series.
This is correct. I am betting on CJ from what we saw last year with the Pelicans. If I don't even want to call it projecting, because I don't think I'm projecting. It's more so that I believe that what I saw last year in New Orleans from CJ is replicable. And I believe that what I saw from CJ last year is higher than how I currently feel about Donovan Mitchell. Now, that gap is very negligible, but I do feel that CJ is a bit of a better playmaker. And as much as you do say Donovan Mitchell has been a very good playoff performer, I can agree with that. CJ has also been a very good playoff performer in his own right. Now, not as the number 1, and that is a key distinction, and that's fair. But from what I saw last year in New Orleans with CJ, I believe that can be replicable. I believe he's going to have a better team around him this year, which is going to allow him to be even more productive, not necessarily from a statistical standpoint, but at least from an impact standpoint. And that gave him a slight edge for me over Mitchell.
Good argument.
Okay.
Good argument.
All right. I just needed to hear
I
the
guess I don't.
elongated version
Yeah,
of that.
I guess I don't feel like it's. It kind of is a little crazy, but it's not because you said it's so close. Like you're probably really splitting hairs, and you're probably not that confident in having Donovan Mitchell at 6. But it's like everything's so close that it's like it's just how it feel. And we're here giving our list out, and you're just standing by it. I like it. It's a hot take. People are gonna see that shit and be like, "Damn, he got Donovan Mitchell at 6. Why?" That's tough. That's tough.
This is a tough list, man. This is why I really struggled with this list. It really did.
I'm just glad our lists are different because our first 3 were all the same. I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm not feeling this, but okay.
Yeah, no,
It's a lot different
no.
now. I want to see what the top
Making it
5 look
very
like.
different after that.
Yeah, we're in the top. We're in the top 5 now, aren't we? Already.
We are in the top 5.
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna start off my top 5 with Jaylen Brown, which I think is a good spot for him in this kind of like tight race, because I think he's a player who the discourse around has been very, very intriguing, given how the Celtics did in the postseason. Because at times, and I will stand by this, at times during the playoffs, he played like the best player on that team. And that was a team that made the finals. Good two-way ability, good scorer, really like good piece to fit alongside other impact players. But it's like difficult for me to put him so high, almost because he feels almost a little bit limited by what's around him. And what I mean by that is not that like he doesn't fit with the players around him, but more so they have so many great players that it's like, okay, how much of this impact is specifically Jaylen, and how much of it is just the Celtics having so much good talent that they're just kind of doing it as a team. Like Jaylen Brown has a big scoring night, and yes, he has really good scoring ability, but the defense is also paying attention to a lot of other things happening. And so being on such a good team, it makes it hard when you're splitting hairs for me to put him above the top 4. But based on what he does, I don't think I can put him lower than 5.
I'll talk about that when I get to Jaylen Brown on my list.
Yeah. I'm going to save most of my Jaylen Brown talk as well for later on. But I think there's some fair points there. Like you say, he was the best player for at least 2 rounds of the playoffs on that Boston team, was a key part of them getting to the finals. Good two-way game, which a lot of guys up on this list don't have. They're mainly offensive engines and lack a bit of the defensive ability, which does give him a bit more to his game as well. But there's no doubt he's a very valuable player for Boston. I'll touch on him more later, but I think five's a fine spot for him, but he's not where I have him. We'll put it that way.
My number 5. This hurts my heart, man. This hurts my heart because this is somebody that was easily number 1 just a couple years ago. For years, James Harden, man, he's number 5.
Yeah,
and I debated on putting him lower, man, because last season was not pretty. It wasn't pretty, man. Even though his counting stats, like that's a down year for him, 22, 7, and 10 assists. That's a down year, but it wasn't good. It was not pretty. He just looked limited all year long. Was not hitting the 3-point shot. I think he might have shot like low 30s from 3. I think it was like 31 or 33%. It was something crazy low for him. Field goal percentage was even lower than it's really ever been. I mean, 41%. It's just bad for him. And he just didn't look like himself. And the last image I have of James Harden was in the playoffs, was him not taking any shots in the second half and just being a shell of himself. And I almost think putting him at 5 is kind of generous, man, because I'm hoping and I'm hopeful that he will bounce back this season. But last year was not pretty, man. We saw in Spurs he still had it, but it just wasn't consistent, whether it was the hamstring still being a problem or just him being out of shape or whatever it was. It just wasn't a good year for him. But I'm going to keep him at 5. Obviously, he is a point guard, but ESPN still has him at a 2 guard like it's 2016, but neither here nor there. James Harden at 5. Yeah, a big fall off, but I'm hopeful for a bounce back.
Yeah, I echo a lot of similar thoughts about James Harden as well. He's also at number 5 on my list. If I'm projecting, I probably have him higher on my list. I don't think we're going to see prime Harden back again. I think anyone who expects that at this point is probably hoping for a little bit too much. That being said, when you combine his age, his need for his explosive first step, and the injuries he's dealt with over the last couple of years, combined with shorter off seasons, I do think some combination of that has impacted how productive he can be. So I do think he's going to be better next season. How much better, that remains to be seen. He can still play make well. He can still score at a fine level, but like you said, his efficiency really hurt last year. That needs to improve. But a big part of that for Harden is just going to be, can he be healthy, and does he still have that same levels of explosiveness? Because James Harden isn't a player you think of as this like explosive finishing with acrobatic dunks or these flashy plays that you think of as this typical explosive athlete like a Zack Lavine a few years ago with explosive dunks. But that quick first step is so important to everything he does that when he starts to lose that explosiveness, if that doesn't come back, it is going to hurt. So whether that comes back next year is going to be a big part. I think it will to an extent, and I do think he'll be better next year, but based on what we saw from him last year, like you said, it's tough to put him any higher. It really is.
It's crazy you mentioned that. Like, his game is very simple. And I was having a conversation with my dad, and he was like, out of all the stars, like James Harden has one of the most replicable, you can replicate his game better than like most stars, like, because it's very simple. It's just like, getting to the basket and finishing drawing fouls. And just, he has a step back three in his game, which is like a big part in the floater. Like, it's a very simple game. But like you said, if he doesn't have that first step, he's limited, because then we already know, like, he's a high volume jump shooter, but his percentages were never great in the first place. So if the defense knows, like, he's not getting by me, he's a lot easier to defend. So, man, we'll see. It's a lot rides on Philly's successes with James Harden. Like, he has to be not, like you said, Houston Harden, but he's got to be somewhere near his first year in Brooklyn before the injury. I think that's more achievable for him, hopefully. So we'll have to just see and wait.
Yeah, he needs to be able to be a 1B as opposed to arguably a C last year in the playoffs. Like, he doesn't need to be as good as Embiid. He doesn't need to be better than Embiid, but he needs to be good enough that he can be your primary perimeter scorer at a good to great level. Because Tyrese Maxey can't be the number one guy on that team if they're going to have success. All love for Tyrese Maxey. He's a great player, and he played brilliantly last year. He was just after Bane on the honorable mentions for this list. But he can't be your 1B or a number 2 if this Philadelphia team is going to compete for a title.
Okay. Our lists do vary quite a bit here. I got to be honest. This is what I was expecting, but at number 4 is where I have Donovan Mitchell. Literally, the first thing I wrote down here in my notes about Donovan Mitchell was goes nuclear in the playoffs. And I know I'm the guy that values playoffs a ton, but bro, I swear when that postseason comes, this man becomes like the best shooting guard in the league.
He's okay.
And like he, from all my money, he plays as good as anybody. Now, obviously, there are still flaws in his game. His defense, obviously, is the biggest one, but still in Utah, he powered that offense. I think obviously they had other players that could fulfill a role or do whatever, but he was really the biggest dynamic player and the guy that everything sort of ran through. And now I think his game might be even more opened up playing next to a really good playmaker, next to some other good players that'll be there, some good paint presences. I mean, obviously he already had Gobert, but I feel like at least the upside of a Mobley might be like a little bit better of an offensive paint presence to play off of. But that's projecting, so that's not really too much into it. But just the dynamic scorer that Donovan Mitchell is, the way he elevates his game, and the way that he can just kind of improve and take himself to be in like a number one conversation in the postseason makes me have to put him like top 4. It's very simple because I feel like shooting guard is the position where it's like literally like half the guys on this list is like, okay, what do you do really well? And it's like score the ball really dynamically. But in like traditional terms, that's almost like the role of a shooting guard. And especially right now that he's playing with Darius Garland, it's like that's really all I need him to do because there's already a really good playmaker. So as long as Donovan Mitchell is like a solid playmaker, cool. He does what he needs to do, fills that role, I think, really well. And if you really need him to get a bucket in any situation, he will do that for you. And it's like that thing I was talking about way earlier where it's like even if somebody else might have a little bit more talent than him, he is about to fulfill his role so well that I'm giving him number 4.
Did you have Jaylen Brown at 5?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, I got the list written out if you need the list at any point. I got a few points to make regarding that. I got to play devil's advocate for Mitchell here, given where he was on my list. As much as I do agree with Donovan Mitchell being a good playoff performer, if we are going off of recent playoffs and what we last saw from a player, he couldn't do anything against a Luka-less Dallas team, which is slightly concerning. I don't think that's going to be the long-term projection of Mitchell in the playoffs. I think we've seen enough to show that he is going to be a good playoff performer, but what we last saw was very bad. I mean, he barely shot 20% from 3. Small sample size, of course, but if you're the number one guy on a team, that needs to be better. As far as when you were talking about bigs in Cleveland, there's no doubt he's already going to have better bigs offensively to have a 2-man game with, to get feeds in the post with regards to Allen and Mobley, both of which already have much better offensive games, in my opinion, than Gobert does. Allen is going to be much better to have. Maybe not quite at the same level as a lob threat, but to do anything else with anything other than just a simple lay-in, Allen has much more versatility and layers to his offensive game than I think he gets credit for. I mean, this is a guy who puts up 15, 16 points a night, and sure, he's not doing anything crazy on the offensive end, but he has a bit of a jump shot, he has a bit of a hook shot, he has a bit of a touch shot. He can do more than just pick and roll, lob, offensive rebound, putback. So he's going to have more avenue to play make in that regard as well, but there's no doubt he's a great player. Hopefully next year's playoffs are good for him and we don't have a replication of what he just did against Dallas, but yeah, lower on my list, but fair enough to have him here.
I feel like Utah as a whole was just sort of falling apart from the seams. Like, it honestly all started even before the bubble with like the whole Rudy Gobert COVID thing. But I just think as time progressed, there was like the whole thing of like Donovan didn't want to pass to Rudy because they had all this beef and everything. And like, because I can't get inside a player's mind and inside that locker room, like I'm not going to count that against his ranking. But I do think Utah's like failure last year, I think it was a little bit more than just players randomly not playing as good as they can. I feel like there was more going on there, and people were calling for the Utah rebuild literally like a year ago. And I think whether it's some of that noise getting to them or whatever else it may be, I just think that was a messy situation. And I think the player that Mitchell is, I think he'll come into this new situation and he'll absolutely thrive. And that's not me projecting an improvement on Mitchell. That's just the player that Mitchell is, isolated and not Utah. Like, he could be the exact same player, and I think that's why I'm saying, like, his fit as well with their bigs, I think it's not him improving and changing. It's just the player he is, and it's kind of the same thing I did with DeJounte of how he's going to fill in for Trey. That's the player he already is. That's just how he's going to suffice in the situation he's in now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree. I don't think it's projecting. It's just literally the fact of the matter of who Donovan Mitchell is and who he's now playing with, for sure.
Still Darius Garland's team, in my opinion. No, I'm just fine.
I think it is, but that's the conversation.
It is. No, I think it's like a KD Steph thing. KD might have won finals MVP, but that team ran through Steph Curry. That team's gonna run through Darius Garland.
Yeah, we'll talk about it more later.
We will. Number 4, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
This is where I have Jaylen Brown, my guy JB, man. Yeah, like we talked about earlier, there were times in the playoffs, 2 series in particular, like the 2 most important series, where he was the best player on the Celtics, better than Jason Tatum for the entirety of those series. And I think as a number 2, that is so valuable to have, like where on some nights or some series you can be the best player and you can be the most impactful player. And JB has shown that. We mentioned his 2-way ability, which he has. His percentages took a little bit of a hit last year compared to some previous seasons, but still almost 24 points per game. Rebounds the ball well, defends well. Was a slightly better playmaker, which he wasn't like a 1-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. He's a little bit better than that. So that's good to see. We'll see if that can continue to improve because he's still only 25 years old. But, he was so good last year. I remember we did our all-star ballots, which was like one of our first episodes. And I had Jason Tatum as an all-star, but I said Jaylen Brown deserves to be an all-star more than JT did. It's just obviously positions and stuff in the Eastern Conference matters and blah, blah, blah. But JB had a very good year, and I think a very underrated year too. And almost wanted to put him a little higher, but I couldn't do that. I'll be interested to see if Dev might have him higher, but we'll see, man. But I got JB at 4 with room to grow going into next season.
Yeah, definitely room to grow still. As he said, I mean, he's still young, still only 5 years in the league. I'll talk more about him later because I do not have him at number 4. This is where I have CJ McCollum.
Okay.
So I couldn't put him any higher as much as I am high on CJ. This is where I did put number 4. I touched on him earlier. I really think he's going to have a good year with the Pelicans. I think what we saw last year is going to be very much what we see from him moving forward. So I landed at 4 with him. As previously mentioned, 4 through 7 to me, I think all 4 of these guys were probably somewhere from 4 to 7 over the last week on my list, but this is where we ended up. So CJ was at number 4.
Okay. So you got CJ at 4, Harden 5. Was it Lavine?
Donovan Mitchell at 6, and
Donovan
Lavine at 7.
Lavine at 7. Yeah. Wow, that's tough.
It was tough.
That's tough.
It was very tough.
It's tough, man. So you got JB top 3. I love it. I'm here for it, man.
Top 3. I am putting the guys you were high on up on my list. I'll say that much.
Definitely, man. I'm here for the JB, man. But to Gabe's point earlier, what he mentioned about Jaylen Brown was like he didn't he questions how much his impact is compared to like him being around great players. I mean, I kind of didn't understand that point, like what you were trying to say. I'm gonna be totally honest. I didn't understand it. So can you kind of, get back to that?
It's like, that conversation between Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum for the longest time, where people kept saying, "Oh, Jaylen Brown's better than him," but it's like, what is the standard we're holding them to? Like Jaylen Brown has times where he plays really good, and it's like, okay, Jaylen Brown did so good, but then Jaylen Brown does bad, and it's kind of crickets. And it's like,
I don't think so.
For a while it was, and if you think that's changed a little bit, you are more in sort of the Celtics than me. I'm more in like the general space, and I see some Celtic stuff, but you probably do see more of that than me, so that might influence our opinions a little bit, just given the spaces that we're in.
Definitely.
But like, I almost feel like it's the good things are sort of mentioned, but there is some inconsistencies there, and it's like him having a big night. While he has that ability, if the defense is so focused on Tatum or like a Smart, if he's doing like a lot of playmaking, having a big night, or like this player, that player, it's like now it has more room for him to get way easier looks. And I think he can almost get his shots and his looks easier than like Donovan Mitchell can, or a Devin Booker can, or even a Zack Lavine can.
I mean, it does make it somewhat easier, but you still have to have the ability to go and be effective. And he's shown time and time again that, y'all can focus on Tatum, but that means I'm gonna get off. I'm gonna have 30, 35, sometimes 40 points. He did that against the Heat in the finals. He was doing it against the Warriors. Like he was getting off because the defense was focused on Jason Tatum. And really, if you look outside of Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown's the only other guy on the team that can consistently create for himself, and nobody else on the Celtics last season could do that. Like Derek White wasn't doing that shit. Marcus Smart was not doing that effectively. And we know Al Horford, Robert Williams are not asked to do that. So he was asked to be like not only the number 2, but you're the only other guy that can create offense for yourself effectively. And he did that time and time again in the playoffs. And, the team got to the finals because of it, because of how good he was as a number 2. So I definitely see what you're saying, but it's like you could have said the same thing about Klay Thompson for years. Like, yeah, Klay Thompson's great, but he's playing with Steph Curry, so the defense is so focused on Steph Curry. He's getting all these good looks. He's still Klay Thompson. He's still one of the best shooters ever. So, I kind of see what you're saying, but I kind of disagree.
It's just like the way we're kind of splitting hairs here with how close it is. It's like I think he's just inconsistent enough to the point where it's like I know that Donovan Mitchell, like a Devin Booker, even like a Zack Lavine, who I have lower than him, can come out and put up those scoring numbers and like do what they do as a number 1 a little bit more consistently. But because of his two-way ability, I do think that can kind of bring him up a little bit. But him and Mitchell at 4-5 is so close to me that like the right argument could probably convince me to switch. And that's why I said like, and honestly, what Devin was saying with his 4 through 7, it's like it is incredibly close. And that's like the argument that I'm going to give for why I have Mitchell over Brown. But if it's not the strongest argument in the world, it's because it's not the strongest stance in the world.
Yeah, that's fair for sure. I will admit, like JB, you mentioned like Donovan Mitchell goes nuclear. Jaylen Brown will go nuclear for like a quarter. It will just score like 23 points in a quarter, and then the rest of the game will have like 5 points. So yeah, I kind of see what you're saying in that sense. But yeah, this list is just all about splitting the smallest of hairs possible, man. Because Dev said his 4 through 7 was so close. Gabe saying like his top 5, top 6 is like kind of close in some areas, and mine's is kind of the same way too.
Yeah, this was definitely the toughest list I had to make, for sure.
Has everybody given their 4?
Everyone has given their 4, yes. You had Mitchell, Tyrik had Jaylen Brown, and I had CJ.
And technically, we know you have Brown at 3, right?
I do have Jaylen Brown at 3, yes. I wasn't crazy enough to put him any higher, so.
That would have been nuts.
No, the top 2, not necessarily in the order, but the top 2, at least in being the top 2, was the easiest part of this list. But JB does go at number 3 for me. Again, over the last few days, I had him solidified at 3, but I've had him down like as low as 5 or 6 on this list as I've been thinking about it over the last few days. The thing that gave him the edge for me was he is a much better defender than anyone else on this list other than Freddie and DeJounte Murray. As far as the guys below him, Paul George will be talked about later, but I wasn't putting him as high as Paul George, so that wasn't really in the discussion. JB, when compared to, like, I know you were talking about Donovan Mitchell and Zack Lavine earlier, Gabe. Again, we're splitting hairs, right? But when you're talking about Jaylen Brown having a bit more talent around him, like Tyrik mentioned, Tatum's still really the only other primary shot creator. So he might have more talent, but it's not necessarily in the shot creation standpoint. The only other guy in this list who is the number 1 or has been the number 1 guy on their team is Donovan Mitchell. So he's shown that he can do that. Jaylen Brown has shown he's been the best player, but he hasn't been in a situation where he has to be the number 1. And so that's where you can kind of start to split hairs and say maybe JB shouldn't be as high up on that list. But he's shown through the playoffs that he can be the best player on a team that goes far. He has that defensive ability that I just don't see from a Donovan Mitchell, from a Zack Lavine, from a James Harden. And when you compare him to a Donovan Mitchell, Mitchell's been the number 1. He's taking slightly harder shots. He has to do slightly more, but JB's also more efficient. So it's not, if they were shooting the same efficiency, then that's a little bit more concerning. But JB's been able to be a bit more efficient, even though his efficiency did drop a bit last year. It was still better than Mitchell's has been. So we're splitting hairs again, there's no doubt. But JB most importantly to get him over this edge for me was his two-way impact. As mentioned, the guys below him don't have anywhere near as much defensive impact as JB does, even though he does have some poor off-ball defense at time. His on-ball defense is miles above anyone else below him until DeJounte and Fred VanVleet.
Definitely. Well said. Love the argument, man. Gabe, you want to go ahead and give your third?
All right.
I don't even know who you haven't mentioned yet. Oh,
James
no.
Harden.
Yep.
Make your argument.
Yeah, this should be good. This should be good.
I do have James Harden at number 3. And I am about to be a super James Harden apologist because, like, last season was just – I think there were still some aspects there. We saw the flashes of Harden. He's obviously not going to get back to prime Harden. But we did see the flashes of greatness. But, like, overall, the season was kind of a mess. And from his perspective, like, starting the season in Brooklyn, and honestly, if I was in Brooklyn, like, I don't know how, like, committed I would be and sort of just, like, being there. I mean, it's like, it doesn't even really have to be explained that much. It's just a ton of drama, and it's like, this is such a mess, and that's why he obviously ended up wanting out. And he is that player where, I mean, the same thing kind of happened in Houston where it's like he wanted out, and you can tell on the court that he wants out. I think he kind of came to Philly, and then it was like he played really good for a second and was doing some different stuff, but then it kind of fell a little bit. I do think out of this entire list, he's the best playmaker. So he does have one thing that it's like, okay, he is the best at that. I also think in his role next to Joel Embiid, if they just run the pick and roll all the time, I think that would make that team incredibly successful because I trust James Harden's playmaking to absolutely, like, kill with that. Given those two things, it's like he has that. He obviously, I mean, he has the rebounding, which isn't too big of a deal when you're talking about guards, but it is an extra aspect that he has up on a lot of other people. His scoring definitely did take a hit, but a lot of other parts of his game still kind of maintain some of that. And honestly, I think his playmaking almost went a little bit up as his scoring regressed a little bit. I can see why you guys had him lower, for sure. But I think that I trust in James Harden, and I think given kind of the injuries, the sort of shortened off seasons that could have contributed to that, the drama in Brooklyn, and then joining a new team mid-season, I think a lot of those different factors kind of made it a bit of a down year, but I think he showed enough flashes, and I believe in him enough in what he still can do to put him at 3.
3. That's a hot one.
Yeah.
I ain't mad at it, though.
Yeah.
He talked about Harden a lot, though, so we'll see. Hopefully he can get back to just some type of high level, man. I mean, he was still effective last year, but we know that's not James Harden that we've been used to seeing. So just hopefully he can get back.
Even if his role changes, it's like I think with his abilities that he can slide in and he can just straight facilitate to Maxey, to Tobias, obviously to Embiid a ton. So the rest of the players they have on that team, because they have pieces. I mean, Philly's expected to be a very good team, and Harden's a big part of why. I think he can be such a facilitator that it might even open his game up a little bit more because he's used to a lot of that ISO shot creation. And obviously he's still going to have some of those skills, but not at the same level. But it's like if they really get into a chemistry this offseason to where he can play make and run that offense super effectively, I think it might open up the scoring game a little bit for him again.
I think that's the idea, and I think that's why he took a pay cut so they can bring in more pieces to where, you know, they have some better shooters on the perimeter. And I'm sure they're hopeful like Tyrese takes another step forward. Tobias, you know, finds his way a little bit. But I'm sure that's the idea. I'm sure that's what James Harden kind of wants right now, is just to be more so a facilitator, only have to, step it up when he has to. But for the team to be successful in the playoffs, he has to be, like Devin said, he has to be 1B to Joel, because this team's only going to be as good as James Harden is, in the postseason.
I do think, though, it almost works in his favor because, like I say with the fit, I think that he will be accepting of a role change. I think he already was in Brooklyn, to be fair. I think that's where he really started the transition from being like, okay, I'm going to pass, but I'm really going to score a ton. I think he kind of already changed his role and was like, okay, I'm the point guard. My job is to facilitate and run the offense. Now I think he's coming to Philly. He's like, okay, now I need to be kind of the guard running things while our best player is the center. That's something he hasn't really done before. I mean, he had Dwight Howard for a couple years, but I think Dwight Howard on the Rockets is definitely not the beast that Joel Embiid is right now. And so his ability to accept a role change and kind of adjust his game accordingly, I wish he would do a little bit more off ball. That is kind of the last thing that he would have to add, which he did for a little bit. Maybe with him committing to the pay cut and things, maybe that's showing a commitment to maybe he will change and kind of do more of that. But that's projecting. So I can't really account for that. But if he could do that, I think he could really add a lot of longevity to his career.
Definitely. I haven't given my 3 yet. We talked about Donovan Mitchell's my 3. We talked about him a lot. I was splitting hairs, and Donovan Mitchell was able to get the 3 spot. We'll see how his next chapter goes, but he was asked to do so much in Utah. I think I kind of valued that he was still so effective and even improved as a playmaker. I would love to see him just be better as a defender, because in college he was known for his defense, and he just hasn't been a defender in the league at all. So hopefully he can improve in that aspect. But I just got him at 3. We talked about him a ton, so no need to speak on Donovan Mitchell that much longer, because we got to talk about him at the end of this episode too.
Dang, is that in top 2 discussions then?
Top 2 discussions it is.
All right, who's gonna start it off?
I'll give us a start.
Yeah, go ahead. I was gonna say Devin.
Sounds like you guys have an agreement on one, and I'm not sure if we're in agreement or not, but I put Devin Booker at number 2.
I did too.
I did as well. Good thing I'll see. Devin got us started on Devin.
Yes, sir. Booker was brilliant last year. There's no doubt about it. Dark Horse MVP candidate, All-Star, the best player on the Suns last year. He made that clear throughout the course of the season. It was a little bit murky at times since CP's been on the team, but Booker made it clear last year he's the best player on the team. That being said, when we're comparing him to who's number 1 on my list, and Paul George, before he got injured, was also in MVP discussions in his own right, and was showing and reminding everyone specifically on Twitter that had been annoying me for the last 18 months that, oh yeah, Paul George actually is good. And the biggest difference for me between Devin Booker and Paul George is that although Devin Booker has improved as a defender, there's leaps and bounds between what they can do defensively when it comes down to committing on that end of the floor, specifically come playoff time when both of them buckle down and give their 100% on that end. We know they're both great scorers. They can both score from the paint, from mid-range, from three-point range. But Paul George has significantly better defense to his game, and I'd maybe give him a slight edge in playmaking, although it's fairly negligible. But that defense from Paul George and compared to Devin Booker is just what gives him the slight edge for me. But there's no doubt that Devin Booker just took a little bit of an extra leap last year as the Suns were as good as they were, and just showed how impactful he can be as the best guy on a team that's at the top of the West.
Well said. Yeah, it's like these two are both number 1 worthy. It's like saying you're the second richest man in the world, and that's what Devin Booker is in the shooting guard category. All NBA first team, which is just like kind of insane, like that he made all NBA first team, man. He was incredible last year, but like you said, like their offensive games between him and Paul George are probably like right there on the same level. But defensively, man, Paul George is world class when it comes to his ability on that side of the floor. And when he was playing last year, the Clippers were 5 games above 500. 18-13, I think, was their record in the 31 games that he played. So, it would be interesting to see if he had a full season and they missed the play-in, and he did not play in the last play-in game. So it's just kind of, you never know what might have happened. They might have made the playoffs if he didn't get COVID last second. So yeah, Paul George, number one shooting guard. I'm interested to see if he'll even play the 2 this year. I really want to see what the Clippers rotation is going to be, man.
Me too.
Paul, he's just been so great. Like when Kawhi's out, it's like Paul George just steps up and is clearly a number one and is good at doing so. Even before he got to LA, it's like he went into that OKC situation where Russ was clearly the number one, and within like 2 years, like Paul George showed he was an MVP candidate. Like he became that guy, and it's like he's been doing this forever, and I think does not get the recognition because of the whole like playoff P thing or whatever. But like, not only does Paul George have like a deep bag, he's also one of the best shooters ever, which people don't usually talk about. Great defender, which obviously you guys have touched on, but he just like he does it all. Like there's not really a thing that he doesn't do well. His playmaking got much improved in LA. That was one of his I guess bigger weaknesses if he had any. But he's just so good at like everything that there's not really a big hole in his game, and for that reason, I think that's what really makes him number one.
Yeah, one of the smoothest players in the league. Really one of the smoothest ever when it just comes to his offensive bag, as Gabe would say.
Facts.
And it's like, yeah, Devin Booker has that, but with like the defense, that was the thing. That was really like it. Like I think when it comes to like Devin Booker's argument could be like he led a team to the finals and had good stats for the most part in said finals, but it's like I think Paul George being the difference between Paul George leading a team to the conference finals that same year and Devin Booker with Chris Paul leading a team to the finals. Paul George's defensive impact is more than that like one extra playoff series win would like give you an edge in a conversation. Yeah. So I think while they might be close to each other as players, I think at the end of the day the decision was not a hard one to make.
I agree.
Yeah,
I think it's pretty straightforward.
That two-way impact just gives them that edge for sure. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how that rotation looks in LA. They have such absurd depth. It's disgusting.
Are you bringing Norm off the bench when he's making 90 M's? I don't know. And then like you'll like John Wall, Norm, PG, Kawhi, Zubac. Then you got Marcus Morris off the bench, Luke Kennard off the bench, Robert Covington off the bench. I forgot about Batum.
Are the Clippers a super team?
Their depth is absurd. I don't know if we've ever seen a team with such quantity and quality of depth.
I mean, they need depth just because Kawhi is not going to play over like games. But
it's giving me
Terrence Mann is still there. Amir Coffey's the 12th man. Like, man.
It's giving me 2019 Celtics vibes.
I've never seen a team so committed.
Hopefully better.
Literally, it's just Kawhi being healthy. I think like literally, when Kawhi was healthy in LA, like the bubble was the bubble. That was whatever. But like 2021, I'm gonna stand on this. They would have made the finals.
I think so too.
Kawhi did not get hurt. Like Kawhi is like to me like a top probably 6 player in the league, and when he's in the playoffs, he's like a top 3 player because he just is even more.
At that time, Kawhi was considered like top 3, like by a lot of people.
Yeah.
And in that 2021 run, like obviously Paul George closed the deal against Utah, but they for sure, I think, were getting past the Suns if they had Kawhi Leonard. Because if there's one thing that Kawhi Leonard is just unstoppable in the postseason. Like you just can't do anything about him. Yeah. You just can't. Like he gets to his spots and it's going in. If he wants to lock up, he will lock up your best player. It's like he just has his way with the game. And maybe I'm being a little hyperbolic, but I just miss seeing Kawhi Leonard play so much.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, I don't think you're exaggerating at all there. Kawhi just is that guy, especially like when you talk about come playoff time. I mean, there's a reason every time he gets in the playoffs, it's he the best player in the world. Every time. It's synonymous with Kawhi being in the playoffs. So like you said, if he can come back healthy next year, then that's the biggest thing. The biggest thing for him is just always once he gets back from his significant injury, can he stay on the court and not pick up another significant injury? Because like obviously he load manages and he misses games here and there, but like when push comes to shove, come playoff time, like Kawhi's never really been a guy that's like, oh, I missed a week here and I missed 3 weeks here. It's like when push comes to shove and his team needs him in the playoffs, either he's playing or he's out for a year. Like there's no in between. So if he can avoid the significant injuries, then he's fine. But unfortunately, he's just been unlucky with some of them. It's not even. It's. I struggle with the injury prone label for Kawhi because there's been some of these injuries where it's just like, man, like it's not like these typical injury prone injuries where you're out for a few weeks at a time, or the injury just looks like it's like, oh, it didn't look too bad, but he's injured, or these non-contact injuries. Like, I don't know. It's tough. It's tough. Hopefully he can stay healthy because I'd love to see 4 or 5 more years of a really good Kawhi Leonard. But
I think the stat is like Kawhi's missed more games than AD since they both came to LA. But it's like Kawhi, like what did he? What's he? Did he like tore? Did he tear? What did he tear? ACL.
ACL,
Partially torn ACL.
So yeah, he tore ACL. Like Anthony Davis has not had like a major injury. I mean, he's had some that have kept him out for like maybe like a month or so, but
AD just has like shoulder sprain, ankle soreness,
it's so many like nagging things, and that's really the difference.
back spasms, groin injuries. Like AD just has random like soft tissue injuries, man.
Yeah.
But yeah, Kawhi, I like seeing this Clippers team at full strength. Like, if there's anything, if I could make, like, if I was like the basketball god for a day and I could make one guarantee for this NBA season, it would be the Clippers stay healthy, because this is a team that we've been waiting to see play together for like 3 years. Now they have even more pieces, and I'm like, I need to see this happen.
They got everything, man. They got the pieces. They got the coach. They got at least they have a point guard now. Still got Reggie Jackson. So I mean, they got everything that they need. It's just a matter of staying healthy and getting the job done, man. Like, no more excuses at this point.
Right. I really think are the Clippers championship or bust?
If they're healthy, yeah.
Yeah.
Kawhi's 31. They got to do something soon.
I think if you're 3 years in though and you don't get a healthy year, like, then does that not start to raise questions?
I mean, it does, but like, I don't know. Injuries happen, man. I can only blame a team so much for dealing with injuries. Like, it sucks, but like, I can only consider it so much of a bust because like a front office makes a good move. You can't predict that Kawhi Leonard's gonna tear his ACL and miss the playoffs in another full season. Like, that just happens. Like, it's disappointing, no doubt, but I can't really give the franchise any bad sentiments towards buying in and feel like it's a failure, because they made the moves on paper, and when they played, they've been good. It just didn't work out because they couldn't stay healthy. Hopefully that's not how it works out, but
blew a 3-1 lead.
It's the bubble.
It is the bubble. The bubble doesn't count.
Mickey Mouse. Let me ask y'all this, though, because I've been asked this like twice in the last week or so. Give me y'all's top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, like contender-wise. So I thought the East was pretty straightforward, but the West kind of struggled with.
Yeah, I don't know who number 3 would be in the West. I'm gonna think about that one for a second. I'm gonna think about number 3 in the East too.
Top 3 in the East, without thinking about it too much: Bucks, Celtics, Heat.
See, I said Bucks, Celtics, 76ers.
See, I was going to say, I think most people would say the 76ers over the Heat. But come playoff time, the Heat have shown so many times that they'll beat a team that most people think is better than them. That's just what they do. Year in, year out, they went to the finals. Like, right.
Or they get swept.
Okay.
There's no in between.
Short off season after a finals run, I will let it slide since they went to the finals the year prior, and the conference finals game 7 the year after.
I don't know.
I can't let it slide when Brent Forbes is outscoring Jimmy Butler. I can't let that slide.
Yeah, I don't know.
They had a bad moment, but they bounced back.
They did just lose to the Celtics, but it's fine.
They lost to the Celtics in 7 on a last-second shot. Like they were literally
probably should have won that series, to be honest.
They were they were probably 1 or 2 made shots away from going to the finals. Like the Heat are legit.
Yeah, I'm really low on Miami. I'm really low on Miami in the regular season next year, but come playoff time, man, it fully just depends on Butler again, which I mean it's obvious, but it's like, does that jump from good player in the regular season to really good in the playoffs happen again? He's done it twice now, but then he obviously absolutely slumped in between and did nothing. So I don't know. I'd probably give Miami the edge over Philly right now, but really? I'm not confident on that number 3 spot. I'm Boston and Milwaukee, and then one of those two, or maybe even Cleveland. I don't know.
In order, Boston, Miami in order, or Boston, Milwaukee in order, or
probably Milwaukee, Boston.
Okay, that's fair. I actually agree with that.
When you have the best player in the league and a solid supporting cast around him, especially with Drew Holiday's skill set and Chris Middleton's takeover ability, I still like Milwaukee in almost any series, but I think Boston is a clear number 2. I think if you were asking me the top 3 seeds, I would probably give you a hot take and say that Cleveland might nag a top 3 seed, because there's always that one young run and gun team that beats up on everybody in the regular season. Then I think their fate would ultimately end up being falling to Milwaukee in the second round in 6. But
yeah, I can see Milwaukee not carrying and getting like a 4 seed or something like that, or Philly not carrying and getting a 4 seed.
Yeah, I can easily see Miami Philly being the 4-5 matchup, and Miami knocking them out. Respectively.
Give me Philly, man. Give me Philly, man. This different team. They got dogs in them now, man. They got PJ. They got Daniel House, D'Anthony Melton. Joel's gonna be healthy this time around for the full series. It's gonna be a different story, man.
And Jimmy's gonna be better. Jimmy's still gonna find a way, because that's what Jimmy Butler does. Is he finds a way.
There's a lot of questions. There's so many questions on Miami though too. Like they're asking Tyler Hero to take another leap forward. And really, he's going to have to be the bona fide number 2. Kyle Lowry has to be better. That's not a guarantee at this stage in his career. And then it's like their forward depth seems very lacking now. Like, we still don't really know, who is the PJ Tucker replacement? Like
Caleb Martin's about.
It'll be some random guy they find on waivers, bro. It's Miami. They're gonna find a random guy on waivers that's a forward, and he's gonna come in. He's gonna play quality minutes because they do it every year.
I hope Pat Riley's on the phones, or he's over there in freaking Dubai looking at players that he needs to bring over, because
they do it every single.
PJ Tucker was he had Jason Tatum in hell in that playoff series, man. Like Tatum did not know what to do with PJ Tucker in that conference finals, and PJ Tuckers are not just walking the earth all the time, man. Like that's a rare commodity, so that's a big loss. Like that's really the one reason why I'm kind of low on Miami is I think PJ Tucker is a big time loss, and then the questions that I have is I mentioned, their guards have to be better than they were last year. You have to have Tyler Hero take another jump forward, and Kyle Lowry has to be better, which I'm not sure that's a guarantee that he will even get back to anywhere where he was in Toronto.
Yeah, probably not at this point, given he's now 36.
Exactly.
As much as I'd love to see it, probably not. I don't mind their guard depth, but yeah, they're forward. I mean, they have Jimmy and they have Caleb Martin, and that's really it. Unless then you're talking Jovic, then you're saying can Strus play some minutes at the 3, which is not ideal. Then you're talking playing Yurt 7 as a 4, or then you're talking about Udonis Haslem. So it's
I feel like Miami's
rough, man. They
Miami
needed Daniel
surprised
House
me.
is what they needed once they lost
Yes.
PJ Tucker. But
Yeah.
the
They're
gonna
Sixers
get
snatched
stuck.
both of them, and that was the two guys I was advocating for everyone to sign before the free agency period. Because those were my two favorite two-way wings in free agency, and Philly got both of them. So fair play to them.
You know who's a Miami Heat player? Royce O'Neal. He would be perfect in Miami. That is a Miami Heat player right
That
there.
would be a perfect Miami
Telling you,
player.
they always get some undrafted guy, and then they'll probably buy on somebody at like trade deadline time, and they'll be right back there. Just because it's Miami, that's just.
But usually those undrafted guys take like a year or so to really make an impact in Miami. Like it took Gabe Vincent a year, Max Strus a year, Duncan Robinson.
Yeah. I trust in Miami. Philly's gonna get to the playoffs, bro, and like Harden is gonna have some nagging injury. Joel Embiid's probably gonna like get some random like facial fracture in like game 3 and then drop
But
like
then you're gonna have
points per game the rest. Tobias Harris is gonna average like 12 points a game on like 32% shooting, and Tyrese Maxey is gonna be the best player.
But then you're gonna have Kyle Lowry out of shape, overweight, weighing 250 pounds, holding his hamstring the whole series. You're gonna have Tyler Hero sitting on the bench in a bad suit, and then you're gonna just have Jimmy. You're gonna have Jimmy having to score 45 points because Bam doesn't want to take more than 5 shots.
Hey, Jimmy's gonna drop 55. And they're gonna
He's gonna have to,
and then they're gonna
He's
lose by
They're gonna
2.
win because Jimmy is
He's gonna
that
have to,
guy.
man. He's gonna have to.
If there's any player in the league I trust to put on the backpack in a playoff series right now, it's Jimmy Butler, bro. I'm not gonna lie to you. It is Jimmy Butler.
I'm
Not
still taking Kawhi 10 times out of 10 over Jimmy.
I'm still taking Kawhi.
So
Yeah.
Kawhi did not carry a team, bro. He was clearly the best player, but I think the only time he really carried was in that crazy comeback against the Bucks in like game 3. He really took over the last quarter.
The Philly series,
but the rest of the
series,
team
Kawhi
played.
did everything.
He did not do
Philly series,
everything.
Kawhi did everything, bro.
He did not.
Yeah, Kawhi was doing a lot of things before Freddie remembered how to shoot.
Yes, because Freddie
Siakam was good
shit.
and Lowry was good, but they were not great every night. Kawhi was doing a
Siakam
lot
and
of
Lowry were playing way better than Bam and Tyler Hero did last season.
They were. They definitely were.
Tyler Hero also got hurt.
That's true.
He also got hurt. I don't even know if he would have changed it because he was playing so bad in that Celtics series even before. I don't know if it would have changed that much.
All I got else to say on the Eastern Conference is, like you guys mentioned earlier, I think we're going to have some weird first-round matchups because of seeding next year. Because, like Milwaukee might take things easier. Miami, I don't love for the regular season next year because, like you said, Jimmy's going to have to do a lot more next year, and he doesn't in the regular season. The Sixers, who knows? Brooklyn, I don't know, but we know Cleveland's going to be young and charging, and teams that do well in the regular season are usually really good defensive teams, and I expect Cleveland to be one of the best defensive teams in the league. Toronto could be up there depending on how well they do. Who knows what Chicago's going to do again? I don't know. It's going to be weird, man. It's going to be weird. Atlanta could be even up there too.
Give me Cleveland versus Atlanta in the first round, please. I would love that.
That'd be a really fun matchup.
Yeah.
I think that'd be like
3v6.
Grizzlies versus Timberwolves. That'd be like the Grizzlies versus Timberwolves of next year.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Give me the Celtics, though, best record in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, I think so too.
56 wins. I'm calling it now.
I feel like Brooklyn will randomly grab like a 6 seed or something and somehow upset some. Honestly, I would not be surprised at all if Brooklyn grabbed a 6 seed and then upset Cleveland in the first round. If Cleveland grabbed a 3 seed,
that
would not be surprised at all. That would be what would happen.
That would be their luck.
Definitely possible.
Either that or Donovan Mitchell just destroy KD. And
what about out west though? Because who's the third team? Are we agreeing it's Golden State, the Clippers?
That's my top 2 for sure.
Golden State, Clippers, Phoenix.
I kind of want to go Denver. I kind of want to go Denver over Phoenix.
No, it's gotta be.
I'm probably Phoenix. Phoenix.
You made the final 2 years ago.
Yeah, I don't know. I still don't trust Denver's defense enough. It's better. It's probably the best it's been in this era, but I still don't trust it enough. As much as I want to, because I love that team and I like the moves they made this offseason, but I still don't trust that defense enough.
Phoenix is so proven. They're proven. They're also gonna come back mad. Like everything went so well the first year of Chris
They
Paul there,
better.
and they made the finals, and then they come back around this year, and you can't go out like that and not come back swinging. Like I don't expect them to be the 1 seed again. I think that Phoenix will be a cool like 3-4 seed, and then they're gonna come into the playoff mad.
Who
And
will
it's
get the
really
one
good. I
seed?
think this year is going to be Chris Paul's last ride as a very good player. I believe. I think this is his last year to really be like I guess you could say a 1B. I think he's 2, but he does have those moments in the playoffs where he's like that guy. So I think
Right.
this is
Yeah,
this is Chris Paul's last chance.
that's
Period.
fair. That's fair. So who do y'all think is going to be the 1 seed out west then?
It's a great question. It's a great question. If I had to guess right now, I'd probably say Golden State.
I was about to say the exact same thing.
Because I don't think Phoenix is going to be as good. Memphis without Jaren's going to be not as good for the however many first few weeks of the season.
Kawhi
Denver
Leonard.
Clippers are going to be Kawhi in and out of the lineup. Denver is going to be MPJ and Jamal Murray in and out of the lineup probably to start the year. Yeah, Minnesota's probably Minnesota honestly might be my next team.
You know what?
I think they're going to be a really good regular season team.
I would bet the odds on Minnesota being the 1 seed.
Yeah, I don't.
I agree with y'all. I think Golden State will probably that's a good safe pick, but I would bet the odds on Minnesota.
I don't know. I feel like Minnesota's arc would be like chilling at like a 6 seed if they're moving up to like around 3-4 after the break. I think they're a team that could really hit a stride and figure it out after the break. But I think early on it'll become some of that like new team syndrome and getting used to new roles and like I don't know, like Cat and Gobert could work really well off the rip, but then like I feel like they're gonna be a team that's gonna win more than they lose, but it's gonna take a second to really hit a stride.
I don't know if it is.
This is how I look at this Minnesota team, at least from a regular season standpoint. I still have questions in the playoffs about their fit, but a Utah team with Rudy Gobert has been nearly a 50-win team for the last few years. And this Minnesota team on paper to me looks a lot better than any team we've had in Utah. So if you have that level of defense with better defensive pieces around Gobert, I'm taking them as probably a top 4 seed at the very least.
And Anthony Edwards is a dark horse MVP candidate if that happens. I'm telling y'all. Remember I said that.
I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
Okay, interesting. I'm excited. We're like really a month away from basketball, basically, man. I'm so excited.
Me too, man. Me too. I'm so excited for this season. Like there is so much talent across the league from a player and just depth of team perspective. It's outrageous. I keep thinking about it. I swear I tweet about it every week for both conferences, but it's like you looked up and down the Eastern Conference. It's like 1 of 9 really good teams at least are not going to make the playoffs. And it's like, who the heck is that team? Like one of Cleveland, Atlanta, Brooklyn, Chicago, Toronto, like someone has to miss the playoffs. Like that's absurd.
Probably Toronto.
Don't go saying that now.
I'm
Make me sad.
I think I don't know, man.
I'll say the Bulls.
Yeah, that's probably my team right now too. But it's like the Bulls were good before they had injuries, but
They were.
we also might not see Lonzo. So that's the biggest
Yeah,
question.
also
right now.
they might get
Don't
more
know what's going on
injuries.
with him.
That is true. Like I think Scotty can improve. Fred can stay consistent. Pascal can stay consistent. Gary Trent could probably improve a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean,
they could
record-wise,
probably come out and
like record-wise, we were borderline a top 5 team once Siakam like actually was back and playing more than 25 minutes a night. I don't know if that's replicable, but I'd struggle to see a world where we don't make the playoffs. But I can say that about literally every other of the 9 teams. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's honestly probably whatever team gets an injury or two. It's probably how it's going to work. In Chicago, we're starting to man down, so they're already behind in the race, unfortunately. I will say I am glad there's not as many injuries this year to start the season, although I was about to tweet that, and then like Gallinari got his injury, and Gary Harris got his injury. I was like, man, really? It's like it looked like we were about to start this year with like pretty much everyone ready to go day one. But
Yeah.
At least it's better this year than it's been in years past, where it's like you're starting without a Jamal Murray and a Kawhi and an MPJ out at the start of the year and Sexton out right away. And hopefully, guys, you stay a little bit more healthy this year with a bit of a longer off season.
Shout out to Sexton for getting that bag, though.
Facts.
Happy for him.
Facts.
He's about to average like 27 points per game.
He really might.
I'm so serious.
I wouldn't doubt it, man. I wouldn't doubt it.
Take the over every night. Take the over.
Literally, though. Literally.
Yeah, he's about to be very. I think he's about to be on his Jerry Stackhouse.
I feel like you mentioned Jerry Stackhouse a lot.
It's just a prime example of like big, like real empty stats. Because they say empty stats for a lot of players, but bro, that's real empty stats.
Hey, if I could score 30 points a game, I'll do it. If we're losing, fuck it. I'm getting my 30. Y'all gotta step up.
Facts, though.
Fair enough.
Facts.
But yeah, like I think like it's like because there's the big empty stats thing, but like real empty stats in the modern day is like probably like Andre Drummond's rebounds. Like Andre Drummond, half the time he'll get that rebound and just put it back up and miss again.
It's just 49% at the rim.
Right, like Andre Drummond will get like he'll have a double-double and have zero impact on the game. Like empty stats is a real thing that exists. It just got overused.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like young guards on bad teams that just like that label just gets thrown on it. Like Devin Booker's the guy I always think of. Like there was that real conversation for a little bit. Like is Booker just putting up empty stats and then he had a team around him? It's like never mind, he's actually good. I feel like that young guard on a bad team for multiple years, they kind of get that label thrown on them that they don't actually have an impact. And some of them sure might not, but a lot of them actually get pieces around them. It's like, oh, they're actually good. There's a reason they put up 22 a night or 24 a night.
Booker was that guy before Chris Paul even got there. Like the people, the 8-0 bubble Suns will not be forgotten.
Yes.
When they got Monty, they got DeAndre Ayton, they got like some actual players that could play basketball around Devin Booker. They were not a bad team.
Those teams before that were just terrible, though. Like
they were really bad.
Like half of those players are not in the league anymore.
No,
maybe more, maybe over half. Honestly.
First round picks that they busted.
They was probably starting like Tyler Eulis next to Devin Booker, bro.
Tyler Eulis was in there. You would have had Josh Jackson and Dragon Bender.
Josh
Toronto
Raptor.
Yeah, I was gonna say Toronto Raptors. Josh Jackson.
He's on the Raptors now.
Yeah, we signed him this week.
That's decent.
He's the new Stanley. That's the new Stanley Johnson right there.
He's actually had a little resurgence, though. I was kind of impressed that he's still around, honestly, because it was bad.
That was a part of like the Pistons philosophy that we praise so often.
Yeah,
Detroit basketball,
and it did help to get the Marvin Bagley. So
it did.
There you go,
man. Top three contenders in the East. Detroit, man. Detroit basketball.
It's sad. If it was any other year, they might be able to make an actual like 8 seed push, but
someone's got to be the 10 seed. So I don't know who that is yet. Someone's
I think like
Detroit, man.
Detroit's not making the playoffs simply because I don't think in a 1-game situation there are other teams that'll be in that playing like contention.
They will have a player that's better than Cade.
I think that they'll be able to take over and beat the Pistons in a 1-game elimination situation.
Yeah, I think whoever gets that 10 seed is like, I think there's unless someone really surprises me, I think there's a clear gap between the top 9 and everyone else, and then Indiana's just kind of on its own layer. But that's good because they're finally doing something that isn't just sitting in the middle. So I'm giving them props for that. But I don't know. It could be any of those 5 teams. If I had to pick right now, it's probably Orlando, but that's because I'm the biggest Orlando fan. That isn't an Orlando fan.
I do want to ask about this because none of us had Brooklyn in our like top 3 contenders, and Brooklyn's roster, like they look I think much better than they did a year ago. As far as like,
I agree.
if everybody was playing on this team, like in your starting lineup, like you have Kyrie, you have KD, you have Simmons. You play them, say, with like Joe Harris and Nick Claxton. Off the bench, you have like TJ Warren, who can get you a bucket off the bench. Royce O'Neal, solid guy to have in and come play some defense. Seth Curry, shooter, another like guy to have. Like, you have some solid pieces that can play. Maybe the Cam Thomas thing is kind of weird because whenever he gets opportunity, I feel like he does pretty well, but it's like rare. So I feel like he's kind of that guy that has shown flashes that he can be something but hasn't really done it. Regardless, this team has like 8, 9 pieces that can really play at least. So why do we think they're not in that upper echelon?
Do you want a simplified answer or a deep dive answer?
I want whatever answer you want to give.
All their star players in the last few years, availability issues. They don't really have any bigs on the roster that I like. And Steve Nash is still the head coach. That's my simple answer.
Yep. That's probably about the same thing I would say. That and I don't fully trust their defense yet, although it is going to be better. But honestly, I would love for them to run a lineup, obviously depending on the matchup, of like Kyrie, Seth, KD, Royce O'Neal, and Ben Simmons. I would love to see a lineup like that.
That's their best 5 for sure.
I think that gives them their best versatility on both sides of the floor. I think Simmons otherwise, just like with Claxton at the 5, defensively, I'm a little bit more concerned there. I like Simmons at the 5 for offensive spacing. I like getting O'Neal in there for his defense. He's improved as a 3-point shooter, so he can still give you a bit of 3-point shooting there. But like you said, man, Steve Nash is still the head coach, and I don't trust him at all as the head coach.
I think the Bucks will kill them. I think the Celtics will kill them. I think they'll struggle with Philly. I think they might even struggle with Miami, to be honest. Like, I'm not that high on them, man. Like, it would take KD and Kyrie would have to be
healthy
and insane all year long. And Ben Simmons is going to have to go from not playing basketball for over a year to getting back to all NBA type form. And that's a lot to ask. That is a ton to ask. And Steve Nash, bro, Steve Nash there's not really, I think, many bad coaches in the league, but I think Steve Nash is the worst. I really do.
Watch Steve Nash come out in a couple of years and like prove us all wrong. Like, everybody thought Tyronn Lue was a trash coach until he went to the Clippers.
That's true. So, like, what are we saying? Steve Nash needs to be a developmental coach?
Yeah.
He needs to go coach in Detroit right now instead of Casey?
No, I mean, like, I don't know. I think maybe there are certain situations where certain coaches do not exactly thrive. And Steve Nash, I don't know. I think he's probably not the right coach for Brooklyn. I think that's very obvious. But, like, Steve Nash was a point guard, and the way that he played basketball was, like, not really anything like the way, like, Kyrie Irving plays basketball or the way, obviously, that KD plays basketball. And so coming in, like, the way he sees the game might not be the best acclimated to coaching this set of players. But I don't know. It's like, I don't know. When you come into a situation and your first coaching job is this team, I feel like he was not put in a position to succeed.
Yeah, it is a lot of additional off-court stuff to deal with as a first-time head coach. I will definitely give him that. Speaking of like philosophy and how Steve Nash played the game, what do you think of like Steve Nash in Charlotte with like LaMelo when you run a faster tempo offense and LaMelo's the main guy?
You'd once again not be in a position.
I actually like it better than Steve Clifford.
It's better than Steve Clifford. It's still better than Steve Clifford, but he's still not in a position to succeed because Charlotte does not have enough talent for that.
You never know though. Like, some guys do better with less.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Dwayne Casey's one of those guys I always think of like that. Like, not that he was bad when the Raptors were good, but he just seems to always help bad teams overperform. Like, he helped with Toronto when we were bad. Before that, when he was in Minnesota, he was quite good, and then he got fired, and they were absolutely terrible, and they were like a 500 team before he got fired. There's some guys like that just really succeed with poor talent.
Brad Stevens Brad Stevens' best teams were teams that were not expected to be good, but they ended up being really good. Like, but then when he got a bunch of talent, he didn't really know how to manage this. It's yeah, you got to have a particular guy to manage those egos, man. That's why Phil Jackson is so highly regarded. Maybe not because he didn't invent the triangle offense, but he knew how to manage like Dennis Rodman. He knew how to manage Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Kobe, Shaq. Like Phil Jackson just knew how to manage guys' ego, which is a big part of the job when you're dealing with guys that make more money than you do. So, yes, that's why Steve Nash is just in such a tough spot. But he also hasn't shown me any ability to be a good coach. Like his rotations have been bad at times. Like he doesn't really run any schemes or anything. It's just he hasn't shown us anything, but he also has been dealt a kind of a weird hand at the same time for this to be his first coaching job.
Yeah, I think it's the thing with like coaches that do better with less. I think is almost like a college coach versus NBA coach type thing. I think like you mentioned Brad Stevens, like obviously he came from being a good college coach. I think that big thing is like in college it's way more about the system and the schemes. And so when you have like lower tier players that are still trying to carve out a role and find their place in the league and are basically gonna like, okay, coach, this is the role you're gonna tell me to play. All right, I'm gonna do that. I think that's almost easier for them coming from the college game than trying to manage egos and star players that are going to play their game regardless of what it is. And you have to build your coaching scheme around them rather than the players fitting into what you are doing.
We'll see, though. This is his probably last year in Brooklyn to prove that he's actually worth something as a coach. So we'll find out.
Yeah, that's very true. We talked a little bit about the Cleveland fit with the Donovan Mitchell trade. We can talk about that a little bit more after. But what do you guys think about Utah are working with now after they traded away Rudy and Donovan Mitchell? Do we like what they have for assets? Do we not like what they have for assets?
Me and Gabe was talking about this the other day because somebody in our class, I think he's a Cavs fan, and they were kind of talking about it in class and stuff. And I was like, it shows me that Danny Ainge has a clear direction of what he wants. He wants to be so bad that he doesn't want really any like players coming back in return that will help them win games in any way. Like their return were they got guys that they can flip down the line for first round picks. Like they've already flipped Patrick Beverly and they got more guys on the roster that they can flip. So it's clear like they want to be as bad as possible and just get as many draft picks as possible, which is why like I actually like the package that they got from Cleveland. And even so you get Colin Sexton who give him a little deal. Maybe in a year or two, you can trade him away. Maybe he's good enough to where you keep him and you pair him with whoever you draft in the upcoming drafts or whatnot. But I personally like it. I think they did a very good job getting a lot of return, not only, obviously for Donovan Mitchell, but for Rudy. They got a big time return for him, which nobody really expected. So I think they did a hell of a job.
Yeah. I think like you mentioned, like their plan is just to be very bad, which I think is good because they didn't get their number one guy from their trades, right? Like Sexton, if they keep him around, is a nice secondary piece, but they didn't really get that number one guy. So I think with all the picks they have, with the assets they got in return, just being that bad is nice. And they just got so much quantity that they have so many options now. Like when I keep looking back at the trades they made, they just got so much in terms of quantity of assets that they just have so many options going forward now. Like you mentioned, moving on players for further assets. They did it with Patrick Beverly. They still have Jared Vanderbilt. They still have Blake Beasley, who they got in the Rudy Gobert trade. They still could move Mike Conley. They still could move Bogdanovich. They still could move Rudy Gay. Like they have so many players that they can move on for assets. And now they have 7 additional first-round picks, whether they use them all or not, or now they have more flexibility for trades down the road if they end up making a star trade of their own in 3 or 4 years' time. Like they've just put themselves in a spot now where they have so much flexibility to do whatever they want over the next few years while just being so bad that unless the lottery really screws them over, they should be able to get themselves a 1 or near number 1 caliber player over the next few years.
Yeah, I think 15 first-round picks over the next 7 drafts. You have players like Jordan Clarkson can probably nab you a first-round pick from somebody. Mike Conley can probably grab you like a second at the trade deadline. Like Colin Sexton can get his value up. I think you have like enough here to where you can flip guys for stuff that's small to get even more draft compensation, or there's so much opportunity now on this team that players are going to put up stats, and then eventually they're going to kind of raise their stock enough so where maybe when you draft a guy who becomes your next up-and-coming star, you can flip those pieces to get a second guy next to him or whatever it may be. But, yeah, I think you guys kind of mentioned that flexibility already, and sort of they have a lot of options. And I think if you're trying to start a rebuild, that's a good place to be, because then whatever comes your way, you can act accordingly. And obviously, like, things change quick in the NBA. New situations arise. New players may become available. And whatever may happen, it feels like they're kind of ready to capitalize and ready to make their next move.
Yeah, and it's good for them because I can only remember one season in my lifetime as an NBA fan where the Jazz have just been a really bad team. And I think that was maybe like 2014. But really since then they've either been like a 9-10 seed or a playoff team, it seems like. And that's not a good spot to be in. So now they get the chance to be completely bad for 2, 3, maybe even more years than that, and just rebuild, get young talent, and see how the future is in Utah. I think they're in a good spot, man. They got their coach locked up for 5 years, and the front office seems to have a mindset of where they want to go.
Yeah, I completely agree. Unrelated note, I don't know why media outlets report it this way. They've done it with the Utah picks and they've done it with OKC picks now. They count pick swaps as picks because they don't have 15 firsts. Like they have 13, which means they should have 16 if you're including pick swaps. So they didn't even do that right. But the same thing with OKC. I was doing research and I was months ago now on a video that I ended up scrapping. But their first round picks were being overreported by I don't remember how many picks it was now, but it was more than they actually had. I don't know why that's the case, but.
It's still a lot. It's still a lot of picks.
Oh, it is still a lot. It's just me getting annoyed at NBA media because that's the world I live in.
It's better for Utah to have all those picks on than OKC because OKC already has too much young talent. Utah doesn't have any that they're committed to, so they're in a good spot.
Yeah, I don't think it's as bad as like a process 76ers or OKC type level of trying to be bad, because it's at least this roster has a lot of names that are recognizable. Like, people know who Malik Beasley is, Bojan Bogdanovic, Clarkson, Conley. People know who THT is, obviously, with that whole debacle. Rudy Gay, Larry Markkinen, Colin Sexton, Jared Vanderbilt.
Nikhil Alexander Walker.
Yeah. I know who O'Shea Agbaji is from college because I covered a little bit of college. So it's I know who a lot of players on this team are, and it's not unknowns that are just getting big minutes. This is a team of NBA players just with no stars.
All due respect to
no needle movers.
All due respect to that point, that might not hold true in a month.
Yeah.
This team could look very different by the time we see opening day come, or by the trade deadline at the very least.
Bogdanovic is a Boston Celtic.
True. But still, you're going to start the season, and so many players have just been traded in that I don't think they're eligible to be traded again for a while.
Not wrong, but Mike Conley could still go. Bogdanovic could still go. Rudy Gay could still go. Jordan Clarkson could still go. So there's a world where we see a starting lineup of Colin Sexton, THT, Malik Beasley, Lauri Markkinen, and Walker Kessler, with a bench of Balmero, Agbaji, and then it falls off Stanley Johnson and Azubuike.
But still, that's 7. You got 7, 8 NBA players. That is more than OKC had last year as stretches.
Laurie and Collins about to be the best terrible duo ever.
Literally, though.
Jared Vanderbilt is bringing down 15 rebounds per game.
Oh, this man's just gonna have to park underneath the rim.
That's decent. Like you said, Dev, they're in a spot where they can go so many different directions. Because they have guys that can be good supporting pieces, but if they want to move off them, they can. If not, they can keep them and add them to the core because they're all still pretty young in a sense. So they're in a very, very good spot.
Fair enough, I guess. It feels like we've talked so much about the Cavs already this episode that it's like we didn't formally cover the Mitchell stuff, but
We
It's a
didn't
very good
formally
trade.
talk about it, but yeah, it
Very
was
good trade for them, man. Like they didn't give up anything that's like, oh, I can't believe we had to give him up. But I mean, Laurie was cool for them last year, but he's expendable. Same thing with Colin Sexton, and Abaji hasn't even played for them yet. So, whatever they could have got from him, we'll never know in the Cavs uniform. So they got the best player in the trade. They raised their ceiling, and they also have the window to contribute to it. Like they will be good for the next 4 to 5 years. So yeah, I don't really like. Yeah, I've seen so many like videos and stuff, and I've made my own video about it. It's just like I think everybody kind of has the same similar thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they traded probably the two players that fit the least. Obviously, they made it work with like the Cavs are gonna play like 18 7-footers, like that whole thing. Like Lowry, yes, he came in and he was cool, but they know who their like twin towers are basically. Like that is set in stone. One's an all-star and one was in
A
rookie
future
of the year
all-star.
conversations very heavily, high ceiling. And then like Colin Sexton obviously missed last season and the team took off without him. So then that kind of by default made him not really fit. And so it's like, okay, these are two talented players, two NBA players that are like gonna have value. And I mean, yeah, it's like the perfect players for them to get off of. If they were gonna make this trade, I think they put together just about as good of a package as they could have. And yeah, I mean, that's why I think most people are happy with this trade, and Utah fans aren't too bad because they got real NBA players and solid amount of picks back. But Cleveland gave up players that didn't really fit too well with the future of the team, and so I feel like it just worked out, which makes it hard to have any sort of divisive hot take or intriguing, unique opinion about it. But it's like I'm just excited to watch these teams going forward because of Utah's flexibility and Cleveland's rise to contention.
Yeah, it's funny to say because of who they have on the roster, but I genuinely will probably watch Utah more this year than I did last year. Because I just like last year it was just the same thing, man. And at least this year there's something different. There's young guys to watch. Maybe towards the back half of the year that'll change, but like it's just something new. It's something different. They have a direction. There's a reason to be excited, even though they're going to be way worse. Like it's good that they've actually picked a direction. I'm really glad to see it. But
there's unknowns. Like will Colin Sexton actually come out and average 27 points per game? Maybe.
I'll be watching in November
and
early December.
Yeah, that might change after that. But man, yeah, I don't know. I got a lot of basketball to watch. I'm way too excited to watch so many teams. But yeah, you guys covered everything for Cleveland. The only thing that I have to say, which obviously isn't a new take, is Okoro needs to do his thing and continue to improve a little bit as a 3-point shooter, which people have been not giving him as much credit as he deserves. Like the amount of people I saw, like the day of the trade, they were like, "Oh, Okoro needs to shoot 35% from 3-point range next year, and they'll be fine." I'm like, he shot that last year, but sure. But on more volume and while not having 10 years to shoot while being wide open, yes, that needs to improve. If he can shoot 35% while doing that, that matters. But I also don't want to discredit him because he has improved a lot from year 1 to year 2. But that is my concern is like they have 2 3-point shooters right now in their starting lineup, which come playoff time could be a problem. I don't think it's enough to completely be, oh, this team's going to get swept in the playoffs if one of them can't figure out how to shoot. But that's the only thing that's holding them back. Otherwise, I think the sky's the limit for this team. I love their backcourt. I love Mobley, Jared Allen. They're going to be one of the best defensive teams in the league. But they do need a little bit more spacing, and they've kind of exhausted all of their assets and way of trade to do so now. So I don't doubt that Okoro and Mobley can improve there, but that does need to happen, I think, for them to really be at that top tier.
Yeah, I agree.
Otherwise, teams are just going to pack the paint. Otherwise, like you're going to have Mitchell and Garland, and then just 3 guys sitting in the paint.
Exactly.
Honestly, yeah, I could see them in a couple months being a team that's like buying on shooters at the trade deadline.
That's the problem, though. They don't have anything. Like, what are their assets? Like, Dean Wade and Lamar Stevens, like they don't have any first to trade anymore.
Dean
So,
Wade.
they're limited.
Sometimes there is like those shooters that are like super low value, like you can get for almost nothing, or even some guys that like you just pick up off like waivers and you're like, hey, can you make a 3-pointer?
Yeah, like maybe depending on the Clippers rotation, they can get like Kennard for Lamar Stevens in a few seconds or something like that.
Kennard back to Ohio.
I think they'll keep Luke, man. I think the Clippers will keep him.
I think they will too, but
such a
like,
good shooter.
That's the only type of trade I can see them making. I mean, how Boston got Derek White for a bunch of seconds last year, so who knows? But
sometimes around trade deadline time, like players literally get traded for almost nothing.
Yeah, who knows?
Like, watch that. Like, watch them get some shooter for like cash considerations or something. I would not even be surprised.
Man, I saw LeBron yesterday.
You did see LeBron yesterday.
I was within 10 feet of LeBron James. Yeah. Couldn't get any closer than that though. But I saw LeBron, pretty dope. I saw Evan Turner, and listen, I'm be honest, man. This kind of hurt my Celtics heart. I saw Jason Tatum too, right? I missed him walking in because I was over there trying to catch LeBron. And then I came back, and then my guy Jacob, who I work with at the Lantern, he said, if we go over right now, you can get within like 3 feet of Jason Tatum. So I'm like, oh shit, bet. So run over there. I'm basically standing like right next to him. I'm trying to get his attention. Because Jacob's like, you might as well introduce yourself. So I was trying to get his attention. Bro acted like he didn't hear me. Acted Hollywood, man. I was like, wow.
That is tough.
Hurt.
Really
hurt. I was like, damn. That kind of broke my mood real quick.
He's about to stop being a Celtic. Now I know. Listen,
JB all the way now.
JB all the way, man.
Because listen, I was about to say specifically with Tyrik, I know Jaylen Brown has reposted halftime moves multiple times.
Several times.
Jason Tatum went Hollywood on you. So now.
I'm like, man, you played that bad in the finals. You should be very humble right now. Like, you should be willing to speak to anybody the way you played in the finals.
Man, that's Jason Tatum with Hollywood.
Definitely hurt. I was like, damn. But honestly, it was cool to like even be able to see like him, like be right next to him, and then see LeBron. Like, obviously, seeing LeBron's like, damn, what the hell? Like, that's LeBron James. That's one of the best players ever. It's just like, yeah, perks of going to Ohio State and working in social media. Big time perks.
Yeah, no doubt. You got a few bigger names than where I'm at, that's for sure.
Very crazy. I didn't think LeBron was actually going to show up, but there he was.
With Bronny.
With Bronny, too, yeah. Yesterday was such a long day, though, bro, because I went to game day in the morning. Then I came home for like a couple hours to eat. Then back at the stadium at 3 o'clock, and then basically I didn't get home until 2 a.m.
No surprise.
Like pretty much, real tough.
Yeah, I was
Jason Tatum's jersey.
Yeah, I cannot believe that's so fraudulent, bro.
Really dissed me though, man, like crazy.
I know that it is kind of like Cavs territory, but still, man. Like.
Yeah.
Jason Tatum has no affiliation with Columbus. Like, if he's here, like, man.
That's what everybody's saying. They're like, why is Jason Tatum here? Like he went to Duke. He's not from Ohio. Like, why is he here? I was wondering the same thing, but.
Hey, Jack Harlow was there. He's from Louisville.
I was. Not that I cared, but I was like real close to him too when I saw him at game day.
Not that I care, man. You're such a hater, bro.
I'm not a Jack Harlow guy, man.
It doesn't matter. It's still like, that's just you're hating. Not that I
mean, it was cool, like to be like in the vicinity of a star, but it's not like it was like if it was J. Cole, it'd be different. I'll be like fanned out for real. Like when I went to see LeBron, I was low key like shaking because I'm like, bro, this is LeBron James. But Jack Harlow, I'm like, oh, that's Jack Harlow. That's cool.
If I was by if I was by Rod Wave, I don't listen to Rod Wave, but that would be cool. I'm not saying it wasn't cool. Like it was cool, but I'm like I wasn't like fanned out or anything. Like it was cool to see him and everything, but like I wasn't like jumping out my skin or anything.
Just wasn't LeBron cool.
Hey,
Exactly.
that's what they
LeBron.
all say, Tyrik.
I have a video, and my camera was very steady. He was not shaking at all. So.
Cannot believe this. All right.
Another random person at the game was Andre Iguodala. I think he was there with Evan Turner because they have a podcast together, I think. But still weird to see.
Everybody got a podcast, bro.
Gabe, they said Iggy was like riding around a scooter on the Oval, like on Friday, bro.
What?
That's what I heard, and I heard multiple people say it too. Said dude was just riding on a scooter around the Oval.
Yeah, it's called Point Forward, apparently.
Yes, never listened to it. I only see like their clips on TikTok.
Everybody got a podcast, bro.
They do. They do.
NBA players retire and be like, we should start a podcast.
No, I'm looking.
Gotta do something in retirement, I guess.
It's like, I know it's like that thing where, like, people that are not good enough to play the game at that level, kind of like they take that passion and they cover the game, but now the people covering the game are the people that played the game, so then it makes it even like, dang, it almost makes it even harder to get in now. But still, all respect to anybody chasing their bag, however they may see fit.
Just gotta get in where you fit in, man.
Pretty much.
Facts.
Have we had an episode where we talked about strictly basketball for 2 hours? And like, cause I feel like last week's episode didn't even run this long.
It was like an hour and 40, but I think it was like hour 20 of basketball or something like that.
This is legit like 2
Definitely
hours.
been the longest one since the playoffs, and even then probably like early playoffs, because once you get to one series, it's like, yeah. Let's talk about the 2 games that we saw over these last 7 days, and that's about it.
Honestly, we've probably done like 2 hours of basketball talk before, because we like literally for a second there we were doing like 3-hour episodes.
I mean, yeah, we've done it before, but it's been a while.
It has, yeah.
It's been a minute for sure.
Some months, man.
We might have had that around free agency in the draft, but
yeah, probably
definitely not since then.
We give all the content, bro. Whenever we pop up, you can be here for a while.
Real talk.
All right, we got anything else for today though?
I was about to say too, I got homework. I got a lot of homework I gotta finish.
I got a couple of Donovan Mitchell videos to write, so that's what I'm doing.
You're smart. You're waiting a few days to post them. Very smart.
Yeah, the Jalen Noel video was done. That was staying for the Saturday slot. We're gonna wait a few more days for the rest of them.
I still
Not that I
gotta
would have
watch
had them
that
ready
one.
earlier, anyways. But
Gotta watch Jalen Noel. I'm all for Jalen Noel. I'm surprised you ain't have him on the list.
not yet. Next year.
Next year, all right. Okay, makes sense.
I can't wait for small forward, bro. Next week's about to be a banger.
Jason Tatum at number 10 now. Tell me.
Jason Tatum, honorable mention. I would have put him on, but he went Hollywood after playing like that in the finals. What I see from me most recently.
Bro really did me. That's crazy. Bro really did me. I was like standing right next to him too. I think I even tapped him. Like, hey, JT. Bro, I was like right next to the dude, bro. I was really
I can
right
see
next
why
to him.
I can see why he ignored you, man. Why you touching Jason Tatum for?
Cause
Hands off the merchandise, Tyre.
I'm his biggest fan. Nah.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
Nah, it's because he probably knew that you like some player that he didn't like. Like some player he's got beef with.
You probably saw my tweets, man. I'll be talking crazy about JT.
I just see. Hey, it's probably, it must have been your own fault, bro.
Probably, yeah. I got to do some self-reflecting, man.
Oh,
all right. On that note,
let's wrap it up.
On that note.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of 3 Point Weekly. Be sure to leave your thoughts on the Donovan Mitchell trade and our top 10 shooting guard list down below in the comments. We thank you guys for tuning in to another one, and we'll be back next week with our top 10 small forwards. Peace.